In the quiet shadows of the Nevada desert, beneath a blanket of stars so vast they seemed to hold secrets of their own, a man sat before television cameras in 1989 and spoke words that would ripple through decades. His face stayed hidden, his voice remained steady, and what he revealed would transform a place that didn't officially exist into the most famous secret in America. Hello, I'm Elias Whitaker, your guide through these hidden stories. Tonight, as the world settles into darkness, I invite you to join me on a journey to a place where the line between what we know and what we wonder becomes beautifully blurred. Pour yourself some tea, adjust your pillows, and let yourself sink into comfort. We're traveling together to Area 51, not as thrill seekers or conspiracy theorists, but as curious souls seeking to understand how one man's testimony changed everything, how a facility that tested the most advanced aircraft in human history became synonymous with something far more mysterious, and how our search for answers sometimes reveals the most fascinating questions. As we explore this tale, feel your worries fade away and let the gentle rhythm of this story carry you toward peaceful rest, because tonight we're not examining claims and counterclaims so much as witnessing how mystery itself can capture the human imagination, how secrets breed speculation, and how the journey matters more than the destination. Settle in. Breathe deeply. Let's begin. Picture a salt flat in southern Nevada during 1955, when the Korean War has ended and the Cold War is intensifying. A time when men in the corridors of the CIA are searching for a place to hide their most ambitious project yet. They need isolation, they need space, and they need terrain that can handle runways for aircraft that don't yet exist. On April 12th of 1955, a CIA officer named Richard Bissell flies over a remote stretch of desert called Groom Lake with Colonel Osmond Ritland and a man named Kelly Johnson, the director of Lockheed's legendary Skunk Works. And below them stretches a landscape so desolate and so removed from civilization that it seems perfect for keeping secrets. This place sits 83 miles northwest of Las Vegas at 4,409 feet above sea level, where a dry lake bed stretches for nearly 4 miles and mountains cradle it on all sides. And most of what makes it perfect is that it's already protected by the Atomic Energy Commission's Nevada Proving Ground, where nuclear tests have left the Earth scarred and restricted. They choose this place and name it by its map designation, Area 51. But here's what I find beautiful about this story, dear listener, because they knew no one would want to work there in this wasteland of salt and sand, this furnace of summer heat. So Kelly Johnson, with a touch of irony that would echo through history, began calling it Paradise Ranch. A jest, a wink, and the workers who came called themselves ranch hands, embracing the absurdity of it all. From these humble, sardonic beginnings, a legend would grow. In 1955, Area 51 consisted of almost nothing: a 5,000-foot runway, 3 aircraft hangars, a handful of administration buildings, and trailers for housing. But what happened there would change aerial reconnaissance forever. The U-2 spy plane, that elegant bird of aluminum and ambition, took its first breath at Area 51 and could reach altitudes no other aircraft of its time could touch, so high that those who saw it streak across the sky, a silver glint against the blue, could scarcely believe their eyes. And that's when the first chapter of our mystery began. The UFO sightings of the 1950s and 60s. You see, when the U-2 flew, it soared far above the altitudes that civilian and military pilots thought were possible, which meant airline crews flying at 20,000 feet would look up and see something impossibly high, catching the sun's light even as dusk fell below. What could fly at such heights? Nothing they knew, nothing in any manual or briefing. So they reported UFOs, unidentified flying objects, and they were right, because these craft were unidentified, at least to them. But they weren't from distant stars. They came from Groom Lake, from Paradise Ranch, from the place that would become Area 51. Let your breathing slow as we consider this irony, because the very secrecy meant to protect American innovation became the soil in which stranger theories would grow, and the military couldn't explain the sightings without revealing the U-2's existence. So they said nothing, and in that silence, imagination flourished. For decades, Area 51 existed in a peculiar state where it was simultaneously secret and known, denied and documented, and even in November 1955, just months after its founding, Las Vegas newspaper reporters were calling it the secret proving ground within the proving ground. Everyone knew something was there, but officially nothing existed at all. The CIA documents from that era, now declassified, reveal something fascinating about the security culture, and you should listen to these words, written in the 1960s about Area 51. Overall security in this area is the highest yet to be maintained in this country, even higher than that of the Manhattan Project, higher than the program that built the atomic bomb, higher than any secret America had kept before. Close your eyes and imagine working there in those early years, where you board a Boeing 737 each morning from a secret terminal. You fly over the desert to a place that isn't on any map, and you work on aircraft that will change the world, the U-2, the A-12, the legendary SR-71 Blackbird with its sleek, impossibly fast design, while holding secrets that could shift the balance of the Cold War. And you can tell no one. Then in 1978, something shifted when the CIA handed Area 51 over to the Air Force, and new projects began, and the F-117 Nighthawk, the world's first true stealth aircraft, took shape in those hangars until on June 18th of 1981, at precisely 6:05 in the morning, test pilot Hal Farley lifted the nose of the YF-117A off the runway at Area 51 for the first time. A plane that could become nearly invisible to radar, a ghost in the sky. By 1983, it achieved operating capability, and the world of aerial warfare would never be the same. But all of this, the U-2, the Blackbird, the Nighthawk, remained classified for years, and workers who became ill from exposure to chemicals burned in open pits and trenches at Groom Lake tried to sue in 1994 civilian contractors and widows of men who had worked there, alleging their loved ones had been poisoned by substances they couldn't even name at a facility the government wouldn't acknowledge. In 1995, President Bill Clinton signed a presidential determination that precluded the release of any classified information regarding the United States Air Force's operating location near Groom Lake, Nevada. And every year after, that determination was renewed by Clinton, by his successor, year after year. The message was clear. Some secrets must remain secret. It wasn't until June 25th of 2013, think about that date, listener, so recent in our lifetime, that the CIA finally released an official history of the U-2 and OXCART projects in response to a Freedom of Information Act request filed 8 years earlier by Jeffrey T. Richelson of George Washington University's National Security Archive. For the first time, the government officially acknowledged that Area 51 existed and that the U-2 had been tested there. And yet by then, Area 51 was already famous, already legendary, already synonymous not with revolutionary aircraft or Cold War victories, but with something else entirely. With aliens, with flying saucers, with cover-ups and conspiracies that had taken root in the American imagination and spread across the world. How did that happen? Let yourself drift a little deeper into relaxation as we turn to the man who changed everything. The man who in 1989 spoke words that would echo for decades. So take a slow, deep breath, hold it gently, and release. We're about to meet Bob Lazar. His name was Robert Scott Lazar, born in January 1959, and on May 15th of 1989, he sat before cameras at Class TV in Las Vegas with his face obscured in shadow, using a pseudonym to protect his identity while they called him Dennis. The interview was supposed to be simple, a 5-minute segment on the 5 o'clock news where the original guest had canceled, and George Knapp, the investigative reporter anchoring that evening, needed someone to fill the time. He thought of a contact, a man who claimed to have worked on something extraordinary in the Nevada desert, someone who might have a story worth telling. What happened next would change Knapp's life. It would change Bob Lazar's life, and it would transform Area 51 from a classified facility into a global phenomenon. Picture this moment where the lights dim in the studio and a figure sits in shadow with his features hidden. And in a calm, measured voice, this man, who called himself Dennis, began to speak about flying saucers, about alien technology, about a facility called S4, built into a mountain south of Area 51, where 9 spacecraft of extraterrestrial origin were being studied. According to Knapp, the phones went crazy, and viewers couldn't believe what they were hearing. Some felt outraged, some felt fascinated, and some felt that someone was finally telling them the truth about what was really happening in the Nevada desert. 7 months later, on November 10th and 13th of 1989, Bob Lazar appeared again, this time unmasked and using his real name, sitting across from George Knapp to tell his story in full. He claimed he had been hired in December 1988, that his job interview had been with a contractor called EG&G, that his employer was the United States Navy, and that he had worked at a facility called S4, located about 10 miles south of the main area, 51 complex, near a place called Papoose Lake. S4, he said, was built into the side of a mountain ridge where aircraft hangars were constructed to blend seamlessly with the natural terrain, invisible from above and invisible from a distance, with 9 aircraft bays that each held a mystery defying everything we understood about physics and engineering. His job was to help reverse engineer their propulsion systems and unlock the secrets of technology that didn't come from Earth. Now let your mind settle as we explore what he described, and don't worry about believing or disbelieving. Just let the details wash over you like a gentle wave. Lazar spoke of one craft in particular, which he nicknamed the Sport Model because of its sleek, elegant design, and he said it was made of a metallic substance that felt similar to liquid titanium, smooth and strange, and unlike anything he had encountered before. Inside, the craft was built on a smaller scale, as if designed for beings smaller than humans, and there were no traditional controls, no buttons or dials or switches as we would recognize them. Instead, Lazar claimed the craft operated through a gravity propulsion system that didn't push through space using conventional thrust, but bent space itself, manipulating gravitational waves to move instantaneously in any direction, which he said would explain the erratic, impossible maneuvers that people reported seeing in UFO sightings, movements that would crush any human pilot and that defied everything we understood about inertia and acceleration. And powering it all, he claimed, was an element 115, something that didn't exist on Earth, something that in 1989 wasn't even on the periodic table. Let that sink in as you relax, because we're talking about an element no one had ever created, an element science didn't acknowledge, and yet Lazar spoke of it with specificity, describing how it functioned and how it was used and how half a pound of a stable isotope could fuel these impossible craft. He explained that when this element 115 was bombarded with protons, it would transform into element 116, immediately decaying and releasing small amounts of antimatter that would be directed into a collision with ordinary matter, annihilating completely and converting to pure energy with near-perfect efficiency. This energy, he said, powered the gravity amplifiers where the craft would generate its own gravitational field, bending the fabric of space-time around it. It was, he claimed, a warp drive. Now here's where the story takes a turn that still fascinates people today, because in 1989, when Lazar spoke these words, element 115 didn't exist. Scientists hadn't created it, and it wasn't in any textbook except as a theoretical prediction, something that might exist, but that no one had synthesized. 14 years later, in 2003, Russian scientists at the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research, working with colleagues from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, created element 115 for the first time. They bombarded americium with calcium ions, and 4 atoms formed that decayed almost instantly, lasting only about 100 milliseconds, but they existed. In 2013, element 115 was officially added to the periodic table, and in 2016 it received its formal name, moscovium. And for those who believed in Bob Lazar, this felt like vindication, because he had spoken of element 115 before science created it, which to them meant something profound. Let your shoulders drop and feel the tension leave your body, because here, dear listener, is where we must walk carefully through the evidence, gently examining what we know and what we don't. Bob Lazar claimed impressive credentials, saying he held a master's degree in physics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, earned in 1982, and another master's degree in electronic technology from the California Institute of Technology, earned in 1985. These are two of the most prestigious scientific institutions in the world, and if Lazar truly held degrees from both, his qualifications would be beyond question. But here's what investigators found when they checked. MIT has no record of Robert Lazar, and neither does Caltech, because no student directories from 1978 to 1990 list his name. No faculty or staff phone books contain it. No degree lists acknowledge it, and no alumni registers show it. The MIT Registrar's Office found nothing. The Alumni Office found nothing, and he doesn't appear on the 1982 commencement list. Caltech similarly has no trace of him. When asked to provide names of professors or fellow students from his time at these institutions, Lazar couldn't, and the one professor he did name, William Duxler, whom he claimed taught at Caltech, was actually located at Pierce Junior College and had never taught at Caltech. Researcher Stanton Friedman, himself a nuclear physicist and a UFO researcher, investigated thoroughly and noted something crucial. Lazar attended Pierce Junior College, a 2-year community college in Los Angeles, at the very same time he claimed to be at MIT, over 2,500 miles away. Friedman stated, "Quite obviously, if one can go to MIT, one doesn't go to Pierce." Scientists Donald R. Prothero and Stanton Friedman both pointed out that Lazar graduated high school late in the bottom third of his class, that his only science course in high school was chemistry, and that with that academic record, neither MIT nor Caltech would have accepted him. Now Lazar has an explanation for this absence of records, claiming the government erased his educational history and turned him into a non-person to discredit him after he went public with his claims about S4. But researchers have a different perspective, noting that only his educational records are missing, while everything else, his high school records, his 1986 bankruptcy filing, his marriage certificates, his later criminal convictions, all of that exists, which raises the question of why the government would erase only his college records and nothing else. And here's another detail to consider gently as you sink deeper into rest. Lazar was verified to have worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory, and that much is true because a 1982 phone book from the lab lists Lazar, Robert right there among scientists and technicians, and a newspaper article from the Los Alamos Monitor dated June 1982 profiled Lazar and his interest in jet-powered cars while mentioning his employment at the lab. So he was there, that's confirmed. But the nature of his work is disputed because the phone book listing shows K/M after his name, indicating he worked for Kirk Meyer, a contractor not directly for Los Alamos National Laboratory, and investigations revealed his role was as a technician, not as a physicist. The journalist who wrote that 1982 article, Terry England, admitted in 2021 that he had taken Lazar's claims of being a physicist at face value and hadn't fact-checked his credentials. Dr. Donald Prothero described Lazar as, in short, rather a minor player at Los Alamos, and the Smithsonian and other outlets have noted that his designation as a physicist appears to be self-proclaimed. Breathe slowly and let these details settle without judgment, because what we have here is a man who worked at Los Alamos, that much is certain, but the extent and nature of that work remains in question, and the advanced degrees he claimed from MIT and Caltech cannot be verified. This matters because credentials matter when someone makes extraordinary claims, and when someone says they worked on alien technology, we naturally ask what qualified them for such work. And that question doesn't have a clear answer. Then there's the matter of his criminal record, which we must acknowledge as part of the full picture. In 1990, Lazar was arrested for aiding and abetting a prostitution ring, and the charge was reduced to felony pandering, to which he pleaded guilty before being ordered to complete 150 hours of community service, stay away from brothels, and undergo psychotherapy. According to court records, he had helped a prostitute set up her business, kept computer records of customers, and took at least 50% of her fees. In 2006, Lazar and his wife were charged with violating the Federal Hazardous Substances Act for shipping restricted chemicals across state lines, and his company, United Nuclear, pleaded guilty to 3 criminal counts before being fined $7,500 in 2007 for violating laws prohibiting the sale of chemicals used to make illegal fireworks. These aren't related to his UFO claims, but they do paint a picture of his character and credibility. Now let your mind rest on this question as you drift. Does any of this prove Lazar didn't work at S4, or that he didn't see what he claims to have seen? Not necessarily, but it does complicate the story and adds layers of doubt to a tale that already strains belief. Let's return to element 115, because this is where the story becomes most intriguing, and where science and speculation dance together in the desert night. When Lazar spoke of element 115 in 1989, he described it with remarkable specificity, saying it was stable, not the fleeting radioactive substance that scientists would later create, and that half a pound of it could power a spacecraft, and that it came from somewhere else in the universe where natural processes created stable forms impossible to synthesize on Earth. And here's what happened. 14 years later, scientists did create element 115, but the moscovium they synthesized bore little resemblance to what Lazar described, because every isotope created has proven extremely radioactive, decaying in less than a second and existing only briefly in particle accelerators before vanishing. Scientists have found no practical use for it, and it cannot power anything or bend gravity. It is, in the words of one physicist, an interesting curiosity of nuclear physics, nothing more. When interviewed in 2014 by George Knapp, Lazar was asked about this discrepancy and responded, "They made just a few atoms, and we'll see what other isotopes they come up with, because one of them, or more, will be stable, and it will have the exact properties that I said." So his claim shifted, because it's not that element 115 as created matched his description, but that the right isotope hasn't been found yet. Here's where skeptics make a compelling point, and I share this gently as you rest. Element 115's existence wasn't a complete surprise, because the periodic table itself predicts where heavier elements should fall, and high school chemistry textbooks from the 1970s showed these predicted elements, often with question marks or parentheses, indicating they hadn't been created yet, but theoretically should exist. Physics texts from 1977 discussed predictions of superheavy elements around atomic number 114, which means the idea that such elements could exist wasn't revolutionary. And anyone with a chemistry background, even at the high school level, could have predicted that element 115 would eventually be synthesized. So was Lazar's mention of element 115 a lucky guess, or did he have access to information that high school textbooks didn't provide? That's the question, and it's one we can hold lightly as we drift toward sleep. What we know for certain is this: the element 115 that exists bears no resemblance to the stable gravity-manipulating fuel Lazar described, and whether a different isotope might someday be found remains an open question. But as of now, after decades of research, no such isotope has emerged. And yet, for those who believe, the fact that Lazar spoke of this element before its creation remains significant. It's a thread they hold on to, a possibility that there's more to the story than we know. Before Bob Lazar went public, he did something that would ultimately lead to his alleged dismissal from S4, because on 3 consecutive Wednesday nights in March and early April of 1989, he brought friends and family into the desert near Area 51 to watch test flights. March 22nd, March 29th, April 5th. Imagine those nights in the vast Nevada desert, cold and dark under star-filled skies, where small groups of people, Lazar, his wife Tracy, friends Gene Huff and John Lear, and others, drove into the wilderness to a place called Tikaboo Valley. On March 22nd, only John Lear saw anything through his telescope, an elliptical light that lasted about 7 minutes. And on March 29th, they videotaped a moving light with the timestamp showing 8:30 p.m. And on April 5th, they tried once more. But this time as they left, a Lincoln County deputy spotted them, and the deputy, whether by chance or by design, reported the group's presence. According to Lazar, this sealed his fate, because on April 7th of 1989, he was ordered to report to Indian Springs Airfield, where he was interrogated about his activities, and he claims he was never officially fired, that his clearance was never officially revoked, but he was told in no uncertain terms that his services were no longer needed. Whether out of fear or frustration or a sense of moral obligation, Lazar decided to go public. Now here's a detail that critics find troubling. Lazar claimed he flew to S4 regularly on daily Boeing 737 flights that departed from a secret terminal where hundreds of workers allegedly took these same flights. Yet, when asked to describe the arrivals area at Area 51, the transfer point he said he passed through each time, he couldn't provide details. What did the facility look like when you stepped off the plane? What did you see? What was the routine? He had no answers. For a facility he allegedly visited multiple times, this absence of basic observational details struck investigators as significant, because if you traveled somewhere regularly, even just as a transfer point, you'd remember something about it. The color of the walls, the layout, the procedures. Lazar couldn't provide those memories. And yet not everyone dismisses Lazar's claims, because some people, credible in their own right, have offered support. Dr. Robert Krangle, a physicist and researcher at Los Alamos, confirmed that he worked with Lazar there and stated that Lazar was present at security briefings and worked in a capacity as a physicist. And Krangle also noted that speaking publicly about classified military projects was not a good career move. He said, "We all knew Bob committed professional suicide when he told about what he was working on for the military." That's an interesting statement, not a confirmation of alien spacecraft, but a confirmation that Lazar worked on something classified, something that, when revealed, had consequences. George Knapp, the journalist who first interviewed Lazar, has stood by aspects of the story for over 3 decades and went on to win a United Press International Award in 1990 for his coverage of UFO-related stories, and he's been described by Rolling Stone as the John the Baptist of the UFO movement. In 2019, filmmaker Jeremy Corbell directed a documentary about Lazar called Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers, which premiered to a crowd of 1,600 people in Los Angeles and later appeared on Netflix. And Corbell stated that he believed there was more evidence that Lazar was telling the truth than there was that he was lying. Lazar appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast, one of the most popular podcasts in the world, bringing his story to millions of new listeners. So the story persists and evolves and finds new audiences, and some people, even after examining all the evidence and all the contradictions, choose to believe. Why? Because we want to believe, or because the alternative, that we're alone, that our technology is our own, that there are no shortcuts to the stars, feels smaller and lonelier and less wondrous. Or because in the end, mystery itself is comforting, and not knowing can be a kind of peace. Fast forward 30 years to the summer of 2019, when a 20-year-old man named Matty Roberts, working at a vape kiosk in Bakersfield, California, watches Bob Lazar on Joe Rogan's podcast. 7 days later, during a bout of insomnia, he creates a Facebook event as a joke and calls it Storm Area 51, They Can't Stop All of Us, with the date set for September 20th of 2019 at 3 a.m. And the plan being that if enough people rush the gates, someone might make it through. If we Naruto run, we can move faster than their bullets. It goes viral, and over 2 million people RSVP going, while another 1.5 million mark themselves as interested, which means the world watches, the media descends, the U.S. Air Force issues warnings, and law enforcement agencies across Nevada mobilize while the FBI convenes meetings, and 350 law enforcement personnel and first responders deploy to the area. The government spends an estimated $11 million safeguarding Area 51 in the largest defense operation in the base's history. And on September 20th of 2019, as the sun rose over the Nevada desert, about 75 to 150 people showed up at the gates wearing alien costumes and carrying signs, taking selfies while a few ran toward the gate but stopped before reaching it. 3 people were arrested for trespassing, 1 for indecent exposure, and 1 for urinating on a fence. No one breached the facility, no aliens were liberated, and the storm that threatened to overwhelm Rachel, Nevada, a town of 56 people, turned into a peaceful, slightly absurd festival. About 1,500 people attended the music festivals in Rachel and nearby Hiko over that weekend, where they listened to bands and camped under the stars and celebrated the mystery, the mythology, the shared fascination with what might be hidden in that desert. And then they went home. So here we are, dear listener, at the end of our journey together, and now let yourself settle completely. Feel the weight of your body against your bed and feel the gentle rhythm of your breath. What have we learned about Area 51 and Bob Lazar? We know that Area 51 exists, and that much is no longer in question because for decades it was denied. But in 2013, the CIA officially acknowledged it. And we know that extraordinary aircraft were tested there, the U-2, the SR-71, the F-117 Nighthawk, and that these aircraft in their time seemed impossible and generated UFO reports from pilots who couldn't believe what they were seeing. We know that Bob Lazar made claims in 1989 that captured the world's imagination, that he spoke of Element 115 before it was created, and that his story has remained consistent for over 3 decades. We also know that his educational credentials cannot be verified, that MIT and Caltech have no record of him, that he worked at Los Alamos but as a technician, not a physicist, that he has a criminal record, that the Element 115 scientists created bears no resemblance to what he described, and that he couldn't describe basic details about Area 51 despite claiming to have been there multiple times. We know that no physical evidence supports his claims, no spacecraft fragments, no photographs, no samples of exotic materials, nothing but his testimony and the testimony of those who choose to believe him. So is Bob Lazar telling the truth? And that, my friend, is a question I cannot answer for you, because he might have worked on something classified that he misunderstood or exaggerated. He might have been part of a disinformation campaign he didn't fully comprehend. He might have seen something that sparked his imagination and created a story around it, or he's telling the truth exactly as he experienced it, and we simply lack the context to understand. But here's what I believe matters most and what I hope you'll carry with you into sleep. The search for truth, the willingness to question, the openness to mystery. These are not weaknesses, but part of what makes us human. Bob Lazar's story, whether true or false, speaks to something deep within us. Our desire to know we're not alone, our hope that there's more to reality than what we can see and touch and measure, and our fascination with the frontier, with the unknown, with the possibility that somewhere out there answers await. Area 51 still operates today, and whatever happens there remains classified, because the planes that fly from that dry lake bed are still being tested, still pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And that's the real story. Not aliens, but human ingenuity, human ambition, and the relentless drive to reach higher, fly faster, and see farther than we ever have before. In the quiet of this night as you drift toward sleep, remember this. We live in a universe of such vast complexity and beauty that we've only begun to understand it, and there are mysteries enough in the stars we can see, in the physics we do understand, and in the natural world that surrounds us. We don't need alien spacecraft to find wonder, because it's everywhere. In the fact that you're here, conscious and aware, listening to this story, in the billions of stars that burn in the darkness, and in the simple miracle of human curiosity. Bob Lazar gave us a story, Area 51 gave us a legend, and we in turn have given these things meaning through our attention, our questions, and our willingness to wonder. Tonight, let go of needing to know, let go of certainty, and rest in the beautiful ambiguity of mysteries that may never be fully solved, because the questions themselves are the gift. Sleep well, dear traveler, and know that you're connected to something greater, a universe of possibility, a world of seekers and dreamers, and a long human tradition of looking up at the night sky and asking, what if? May your dreams be peaceful, may your rest be deep, and may you wake tomorrow with that same sense of wonder that makes us reach for the stars. This is Elias Whitaker, wishing you the gentlest of nights,